Boo, boo, boo. Let me know when you're on.
I'm live.
Awesome. Well, here we go. Alrighty. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Unnaturals Tavern Talk. This is episode 3, where we're gonna continue talking about the Cold Raven and the Unnaturals campaign, as to kind of give you guys like a backstory as to the Unnaturals and why this name, this title means so much to us. As well, we also would like to promote our Patreon.
Oh
Um,
yes.
yeah, our Patreon. You can find the link to it on either Twitch or YouTube. We post the worst ones point of view of the tavern talks to the Patreon, and you can watch them immediately right after if you miss or anything along those lines, if you missed a week or something like that. But if you do not want to use the Patreon or for whatever reason, all you have to do is wait a week and they'll be out on YouTube, the better ones version. But without further ado, you I am the best one, as always, the best or better or the greatest. And we obviously have with me.
The worst one, also known as uh oh hold on, I got something. No, I lost it. Just the worst one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, let's jump in. So here's where we left off. If you don't remember the worst one. A certain barbarian and a certain blood hunter warlock had just unlocked the final lock for the Cold Raven and Curse of Strahd in the Amber Temple, in the room filled with all of the spell books and all of the magical scrolls. Essentially, this had just happened. Remember that? Remember that picture?
I think you're unjustly implying some
Mm-hmm.
things. Uh but yes,
Okay,
out of
so
pure curiosity, unbridled curiosity, I should say, and without supervision, we accidentally did that.
well, let's also not forget there was a bit of manipulation from the Cold Ravens part, which was definitely inclined with it because of something you had just reached out to. Because I believe it was something along the lines we had stated that Lockie, for whatever reason, at a certain point, you were just so full of depression um, that this happened simultaneously before you found your new hope again, essentially. um, that you had reached out to anything, absolutely anything that could hear you. And it was at a moment where I believe you stated yourself you hated the gods because the moon goddess could not give you what you wanted, and it was along those times that you felt like no one could help you because you had lost your brother again, and you felt like walking dead, like no choice you made was perfect. So this thing kind of reached out to you and said, hey, I don't like the gods either, and if you release me, I promise to do whatever I can to help you get your brother back. You just need to ask me and it will be done.
Right.
And all his request was when you f- essentially there's always a loophole is what he said. That was his like words of wisdom to live by, is there is always a loophole, you just have to look for it. And so that happened. We now cut back to the Amber Temple, the wizard basically the wizard library room. um and the book had just been opened. This being made of shadow sort of like steps out of this book, that gets thrown to the floor and sort of like split open, and he steps out of it, and they see a thin, frail body covered in robes that cover most of its head and face. They see a very thinned, like low, like almost like famine uh body of a man. He doesn't have an arm on one side, and one of his eyes are missing, from what they could tell. One of his eyes are green, though, and looking straight at them. And he said, thank you so much for releasing me. I am the Cold Raven. And as a gift to all of you, he turns to the rest of the party, kind of like moving around Val because Val already has his one sort of like request. The Cold Raven says, "I grant any of you a request at any moment you may have." And if you remember correctly, the barbarian who had other godly things had been told, "Don't trust the Cold Raven. Do not trust the Cold Raven. Cold Raven is bad. Cold Raven, bad guy," essentially is what he was told. The barbarian ended up saying, "Fine, I have a request for you." And he said, "I'm all ears." And he said, "I wish the Cold Raven never existed."
I
And
do remember that. This is
um,
such genius.
it was a very genius move. I wish the Cold Raven never existed. And so the being wrapped in shadow looked at him and said, "Understood." He snapped his fingers. Everyone forgot the name Cold Raven. It was almost as if those words and that sentence did not exist anymore. Anytime someone tried to speak it, it was almost as if like nothing came out. And so everyone was smiling. The barbarian was happy with himself, but the being was still there. And he said, "The title that you wished is gone. It no longer exists. So allow me to introduce myself. I
Oh
am
yeah.
I am Vecna, the archlich. It is a
And if
pleasure
you
to
were,
meet you."
and we were all like, "What?" And come to find out that Cold Raven rearranged the letters.
It's an acronym.
It's an acronym that legitimately sits there and says, Vecna.
Yeah, it spells out I believe the Lord Vecna
Yeah.
or Vecna the Lord or something along those lines. But essentially that is what it spells out, and the rest of the party just fully their faces
Jaws hit the ground.
jaws hit the ground. um of course there is one player that's like, "I don't know the significance of Vecna, I don't understand," and she's just like, "You're just a weird undead guy," and he's just like, "Do you have a request for me?" And she kind of looks around the table, and her character very much is like a very much open empath and like telepath, and she kind of just says like, No, I don't want to do anything." And then
Yeah, I think she was the one that
she is
actively,
the only one that never did a request for him ever. The entire game.
yeah, like the smart one.
So everyone had done a request. Val's request was at some point, whenever Val asked, he would get something to assist him getting his brother back. Like a legit godly intervention from Vecna at this point. Like he found out like, "Oh, Vecna's gonna help you get your brother back for sure." Um, Toph used his godly intervention to make the name Cold Raven vanish and the title Cold Raven no longer exist. Fine, it's gone. And we move away to Vecna sort of like saying, "Well, I will hear you if any of you call my name, and I'll be around. All you have to do is tell me your request." And he vanishes. We
Yeah,
speed up.
and
Yeah. What were you going to say?
yeah, and we shit our pants.
So they realize in Barovia, the teacher that Vecna, the teacher that Strahd was taught by was Vecna himself, and Vecna also taught Strahd how to do uh, vampirism, which those of you may know, Vecna made one of the first ever vampires, which was,
Um,
come on, you can do it.
Cat,
Yes,
Kaz.
it was Kaz,
Yeah.
Kaz the
Oh, yeah.
betrayer.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
they also found out Strahd is wielding Kaz's sword.
Yeah.
Um, there's history there. They eventually found out through books as well as journals as well as souls that were there, that the way Strahd was able to capture Vecna, this powerful archlich, essentially ascending god, at this point, was Vecna in this time frame had just been stabbed by the sword of Cass. Cass and had just betrayed Vecna. Vecna stabbed with his own blade, significantly wounded him, and in response, Vecna used his powers to fight Kaz and pulled his soul out of his body and put it into the blade, like canon. And Strahd, in that moment, realized the power that he could have at his fingertips with his teacher weakened. With his selfishness, he grabbed his teacher's book and plunged the sword further into his teacher and used Vecna's own book of vile darkness against him, sealing Vecna within his own book as like his own imprisonment, and using the book as like essentially a generator to keep Barovia active and under Strahd's complete control. That is essentially what they find out. And they find out that one way or another, either if Strahd died, then Vecna's powers would no longer be policed by Strahd, and either something else would have gotten his powers, or Vecna would have eventually broken out. So it could have been the good, better of the lesser evils. They're not sure because this is the path they went.
Yes, yes, and it was very hard. Like with, I thought it was going to be extremely hard to like role play. Like, oh, we don't know who that is, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever else have you. But it turned out it was actually quite easy, especially with Tat, because she legitimately had no idea
Who
the
it was?
shitstorm that we just stepped in, which made it easier for all of us to like roll with her and be like, yeah, I don't know, I just get a bad feeling from that guy, but we were able to essentially
Mm-hmm.
keep within our own character's ignorance of the fact,
Yep.
and and so it really helped out a lot.
Yeah, and then also a moniker of Vecna, that they started seeing more and more of, because this only happened, to I believe at the beginning, this had only happened to Tat. She was whisked away in a storm to the Feywild. That's like her backstory stuff. And then uh Lenestra, the paladin, she also dealt with a storm similar to what Tat described before she was ripped out of her plane of existence and just deposited into the astral sea. The rest of them don't really remember, because partly because Toph died on the battlefield in his backstory and was basically nursed back to health by Tat, and Val uh never really dealt with this storm, but it was quite funny that storm fangs started becoming even more and more prevalent after this happened.
Well,
Basically,
didn't really deal with this.
hold on.
Leaving you're leaving out a very important revelation that that all of us were connected by the storm. That the moment of Val's birth and the botched ritual caused the storm to essentially happen, which affected everyone in the party at different points in their time,
Oh yeah, I was
and
about
that
to mention that.
and
Yeah.
that our paladin Verici
Mm-hmm.
was just a child in the village, literally just over the hill from where Val's mocked ritual when he was a baby happened, was the reason that something came through and destroyed his village and his loved ones, and
Mm-hmm.
he was the only sole survivor from the village when there wasn't. There was two others, Val and his brother Cal,
Yep. Yep.
which
So yeah.
which blew our minds.
Which on top of that, they had to deal with essentially these storms. They found out that they were all affected with were called void storms. They're essentially Vecna's powers affecting planes of existences, since Vecna's final goal in my campaign that they later found out was to smash all the planes of existences into one. He wanted to rule over every plane of existence at the same time and wanted them all to converge into one singular plane of existence, which would have been catastrophic. Um, One of his abilities or rituals, spells, whatever you may call it, that Vecna would do throughout the campaign, now that he was not only released but also in their backstories, he would release storms called void storms, and they would be like these purple and black clouds that would shoot out this like purple, teal, and blue lightning. And basically, that was to describe like there's a storm coming and it's not a natural storm. It's like the super magical, it'll mess your day up sort of storm. And
A
these
unnatural storm, one might say.
yeah, an unnatural storm, one might say. But these storms have the ability to not only like displace things physically within the plane they exist, like a normal tornado storm would, but they literally have the power to displace people into other planes and things into other planes. Like it can tear the essentially the best description I can give is it can Wizard of Oz people to other planes of existences. But while that tornado in the material plane is sending, let's say, the party to the Feywild, another tornado is happening within the Feywild, sending another group of whatever to another plane of existence. Because they're all mirrored, they're all happening at the same time, because they're all like interconnected storms, which made them scary because you could end up in any plane that a storm was happening in, and there was no saving throw, there was no like, it was either run from it and find shelter or you're being taken. There's no in between. There's like that's it. Those are your options. And so
Yes,
yeah, they basically saw Strahd's plane, the Barovia, started to break down. Like its whole plane started to break down. Like for the first time ever, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time. It started feeling warm, like summertime warm. And they also saw a void storm appear. And it was small at first, not that powerful, but it was beginning to spin up and like a storm was coming. Long story short, um, they eventually make their way to Castle Ravenloft after siding with some werewolves that Val found. Some of them were Bloodhunter werewolves. Some of them were natural, like lichen cursed werewolves. And
yes.
they side with the werewolves and some of the druids and people, and they basically go to war at Ravenloft. There is a war happening. They are
Oh,
fighting.
yeah.
Yeah, they.
We even befriended
Mhm.
a dragon, a
Yes,
silver dragon.
they befriended a silver dragon, and it basically swooped down and it carried the party all the way to Castle Ravenloft while the combat was happening below, and it was just absolute destruction and annihilation on the battlefield. There was so much death and loss. It was insane. The party makes it to Castle Ravenloft. They're running around Castle Ravenloft trying to find Strahd. And you have to remind me, did you guys find Strahd first or his wife first?
We did not find his wife. We didn't find his wife until much later. We ran into Strahd himself because
That's
we
right.
landed at the top.
It was, yeah. So you guys landed on top of the castle. Strahd was there, and the castle was breaking apart, and you guys had a fight and have combat in the middle of the legit castle being ripped apart by this storm that had picked up to full power now, and pieces of the castle were just being levitated into space essentially, and just sort of just held there, and you guys had to fight Strahd. Eventually the battle is won, Strahd is killed, and then you guys make it to the throne room where you see Irina wearing the Spider Queen's crown, which is a
Yes, that's
vestige for Loth. Um,
yeah.
that is an important item because that item was in Tat's backstory, and it was the first vestige ever mentioned. And Tat had a connection to the Spider Queen for the longest time until Lenestra ripped it out of her, essentially, via paladin divine holy magic. Like, literally, essentially grabbed a spider cocoon out of the palm, inside the palm of Tat's hand, and just ripped it out and burned it. Like there were spiders growing inside of Tat.
Oh yeah, and let me just say,
Yeah.
one of the funniest moments ever to see the actual player freak out at the thought.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Tat has the player that plays Tat has a extreme phobia to arachnids, which I didn't know until going in. But anyway, she eventually fights through it. They separate her from from the Spider Queen, and they
I do want to. I do
yeah.
want to say. Well, I want to try something a little different. We're gonna pause right here, and I'm gonna interview you and ask you some questions on your
Okay.
thought process.
Okay, we'll stop right here as they meet the straw Irina with the Spider Queen crown. Okay.
Yes. All right. So I'm gonna ask you. We're gonna go back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna. What was your thought process on making your players essentially cry?
At which part?
Just pick a moment.
Just pick a moment.
No, no, no. In all seriousness, how did you, what was your process in when you got everyone's backstories or lack
Hmm.
thereof, or just whatever?
Mm-hmm.
What was your mindset and thought process on how you're gonna weave all these interconnecting stories into one cohesive thing?
So my thought process for them was okay, all these people have individual backstories and they were very basic, very bland, which is what I told them. Like I was like, I don't need it super detailed unless you want it super detailed. Give me what you want. Was I was very open. I was like, it doesn't have to be super detailed if you want. For some of you, this is your first time playing. That's totally fine, and we can delve it out as we play more, which is something I agree to this day. Backstories, I think you can have an outline for your backstory. I think like you can obviously have like your friends, your family, and if you went to school and like your general backstoryness, and then like specific stuff can be added later. Like maybe you find out that you were a werewolf the entire time or something like that. Things that
Oh
wouldn't
yeah,
be so far out of place in that person's backstory to have happened that they just didn't want to mention because like not everyone immediately tells everything about themselves, like they don't
exactly.
like it.
I
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I am a firm believer in setting your backstory. Like, don't go if like you have a super detailed backstory. That's great. If you have an idea on how you want to play your character, that's even greater. But I am a firm believer in getting the basics down in a direction that you want to go, but don't limit yourself to one path on like role play,
Mm-hmm.
attitude, point of view. And I'm a firm believer in letting your fellow players and the role of the moment
Mm-hmm.
dictate key things about your character. Like I was going to play a stern, broken man who was cursed with lycanthropy, and the table
Mm-hmm.
collectively,
Called him the
uh,
puppy. Like the first words out of the barbarian's
yeah,
mouth was,
yeah,
"Come on, puppy."
yeah, when the like it was demean, and I quickly went from the table decided, like the table and the
Mm-hmm.
role play and everything decided collectively that no, that we don't like instinctively we don't need a grim character. We need a broken man pretending to be okay, but still had like who thinks he's a monster, but be one of the most human characters having accidents happen, lightning
Mm-hmm.
strikes,
Yeah.
uh, moments of panic and this indecisiveness and
Yeah.
just funny beat moments, and the table collectively would like help me make that a core part of Val's character.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in build what you want,
Mm-hmm.
have a direction, but don't limit yourself to one path. We'll see branching paths in front of you of how you can play your character, what is needed at the table, and what feels right, and like let the role play and everyone at the table, not just you,
Mm-hmm.
dictate and develop the character itself.
Yeah, and it was really fun. I mean, beyond mixing with their own individual backstories, because everyone's backstories I touched on a little bit. I kind of touched and did my own little flair to it, and they were very okay with it. Like, I mean, you can even ask the worst one. At the beginning of the session, at the beginning of like when we were making characters, session zero, essentially, I said, "This is the campaign we're playing. You can make me a small backstory." As long as you guys are okay, I can mess around with it a little bit if you guys would like me to. It's completely up to you. And they all across the board said, yeah, do what you want with it. We'll just send you what we have. And I said, that sounds great. I'll look at it. And I literally did that. I kept basically what they gave me, I made it the outline, and I just built details into theirs. That's literally all I did. I added like specific details. Like for Val's, I kept the fact that there was a wolf. I kept you had a brother. I kept your brother died by a wolf. I just changed the details. The details were the wolf was actually you. You were manipulated by memory magic to forget that, and it fits so well because you remember stabbing the wolf, but you have an identical twin brother that actually stabbed the wolf, which was you. And it's just your mind's own trauma and PTSD uh wanted to cling so hard to the manipulated memory because it was too hard to actually believe that you did that,
Yeah,
which makes sense.
to admit that I can, yeah, exactly. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, masterful storytelling and weaving things together. I just wanted to get your thought process on, how, what was your mindset going in on how am I going to integrate and kind of connect to my world,
Hmm.
everyone's backstory, and how am I going to interconnect them with each other? And I think you did a fantastic job.
Well,
I was just wanting to know what your
yeah.
thought, where was your head at when you were thinking this?
So the first thing I can tell you for certain is the only person that was actually on the material plane that gave me a backstory where like they were born on the material plane and they stayed on the material plane was Val. Everyone else gave me a backstory where like they could have been born on the material plane, but then by some way or another they're not. So,
Yeah,
for instance, Tat, she was born on the material plane to a noble family, no less, a very prominent, rich noble family from Neverwinter. But her father abused Tat because her mother died, and they were still living with that grief. And Tat ran and was sucked up into a tornado, like Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, and was dipped in the Feywild. And she loved that. She loved the Wizard of Oz. She loved that whole thing. And I was like, that's
and
awesome.
that was that her, was that her creation and thought of how they went, or is this all you?
So she told me she had a dad. She told me she doesn't talk to her family, and she told me she went to the Feywild, and that's where she basically was raised. And I said, okay. She didn't tell me how she got there or anything like that. She
He
also,
left it completely
yeah,
open for
she left the rest of it completely open. And then that's when I added the tornado, why she ran away, and that's also when she met the crown essentially, and the crown was owned by her father, and she touched the crown which her father had strictly told her never touch this crown. And of course, being an adolescent child, she was like, no, I'm gonna do it. And she touched the crown and grabbed it, and that's when it like one of the barbs off of the
you.
barbed
Marked her
crown
and
literally
marked her.
punctured into her skin and yeah, planted a seed or a webbing, if one would, um to the crown. And she was taken to the Feywild where she met her warlock patron, which was Arterian. Um, Arterian, or Artie, or not Artie. It was Arterian, or I think her nickname for him was Hag, uh, because it was, yeah, this the way the name was spelled. It made sense, but that's what she chose, and he was a kind of like when I was describing him to her, and she really liked it because she didn't really come up with anything for her Archfey patron. He was not affiliated with any of the courts either in the Feywild. He was his own sort of Fey Archfey, and that's how he liked it. He liked to be alone. Later on, she found out that he was an Archfey under the Wild Mother, the goddess of the Feywild, and that's essentially how she found about the Wild Mother and everything like that. As for Toph, he was never born on the material plane. He was born in the
Mm,
elemental chaos, specifically the middle version of the elemental chaos, which is essentially like
the converging cup.
a Jurassic Park version of the material plane. In all honesty, he was born on the beach, and he was raised by other orcs and half orcs. And he died died in battle against other half orcs. And the god of storms basically looked at him and said, "Your soul is too good to pass up. Rage on and storm another day." and he was taken by a storm. Never saw the storm because he was actively dead,
Right.
and
Yeah.
he was taken to the Feywild. Tat, on the other hand, saw the storm, saw what color and everything it was, and that's how she was able to put together, like, oh, we were brought on the same storm, because both of Tat and Toph's storms were both void storms. Tat put it together because of how the color of the lightning and the color of the clouds. And they found out that they were brought together via void storms, and Tat nursed Toph back to health. Lenestra, she found out she was from another dimension, another plane altogether, and her plane was invaded by red orcs. For those of you that don't know what Lenestra was, she was a Drenasi, which is a World of Warcraft race, and it was invaded by red orcs.
Oh yeah.
They basically ripped and teared all through Lenestra's plane, taking them whoever left as slaves for the Red Orcs essentially, and they were forced to work in their mines. Lenestra, she could heal and she could dance because she was a charisma-based caster. So one of her best things that she could do was she could put on a show for the Red Orcs as well as her people, and she had a natural affinity to heal because of her paladin skills. Um, and so she basically would play that up, and she was treated like that. Well, eventually, a gem was uncovered, a massive, huge gem, probably like twice the size of Lenestra's entire body, was found and brought to like the center of where they were mining. They found out they were mining inside of a dormant volcano. A storm started to appear at the top of the volcano. That storm was a void storm because Lenestra remembered the lightning. It was purple and blue in color, and it struck the gem. And instead of the gem shattering or breaking or anything like that, it melted the gem. And the melted gem became like this gasified mist that reacted to the storm and basically caused a tear within reality right there and pulled everyone inside of it. It's like what happens when you put two bags of holding inside of each other. It's essentially like
Mm-hmm.
that, but on 100 times more powerful scale. And it pulled everyone in and ripped them apart and just kind of like threw them into different planes of existences. Lenestra got spawned in the astral sea, where she met her god and found out her god was dying and a new god was taking its place. And she found out her new god's name was Sarenrae, and she basically followed Sarenrae, and Sarenrae basically said, I'm going to send you to the material plane now where you will need to shine your light. And her whole purpose was to bring light. And that was also a running story for Lenestra, where she had to deal with the fact that if you look at the light for too long, you eventually become blind to all the darkness around you. And that was a running theme with Lenastra. Like, she was literally like the party's like moral guiding light, but she would blind herself so much to her own light, she would not see the darkness that she was stepping into, this happened a lot with her. Um,
Yes. Yes. Well, all right. Now I have
mhm.
another
Yeah,
question
go ahead.
for DM.
Yeah.
So as you were when you were putting this together after Strahd's domain, did you hop into another module, or is this complete? Did you just start off completely off the cuff on your own? You
Hmm.
had an idea of what direction you wanted to go, and you were just pulling from different things and making and building up your own set as you were going.
So when we got out of Barovia, there were a couple of things that were left unfinished. There was one, Tat wanted to go see her Archfey. Two, Toph needed to go see his silver dragon, which was part of his backstory.
Hmm.
And then Toph was also starting to gain silver dragon scales at the same time, which was another weird thing that everyone's like, what type of sexual transmitted disease did you get? Um,
Yeah,
which,
educated.
and
Yeah.
then the paladin was or sorry, Varici was kind of like an amnesiac. He was like, I know that everyone died in my town, I don't know what from or how, I just know they did, and now I swear an oath to find whatever did it. And he was an oath of vengeance. And then Val's story was basically like, I need to find my brother, I need to find this, I need to. And then Lenestra's story was basically, I just need to keep bringing light, and I need to uh, bash away the dark, which her new mission became kill Vecna because Sarenrae hates the undead. Um, but as for like, did I pull any modules or anything like that? Nope. Fully in my head. All of that was fully in my head after Curse of Strahd. As soon as Curse of Strahd ended, I literally did a complete homebrew of Faerun, and everything we did is completely homebrew based from that point on. There might be things that maybe match a module that I may have read that just retained in my mind. I couldn't honestly tell you, but for the
But
most
for
part,
the most,
yeah,
yeah,
for the most part, no, it was fully a homebrew at that point. There wasn't anything that was I could tell you that was written in a book. Um, but yeah, they uh, but that's about all I can think about for that question because, like I said, I didn't really have any books at the time that I wanted to base it off of after Curse of Strahd. It was kind of a spur of the moment too, because I kind of asked everyone, was like, "Do you guys want to continue after Curse of Strahd?" And they all said, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, we'll continue." Especially considered they released Vecna, and they were just like, "We can't leave on that." And I was like, "That's true." And to be fair, the none of the Vecna adventure modules or source books had come out yet. The only thing that had literally dropped the day before my Vecna reveal was the Vecna dossier. Literally the day before. And I was like, I really
yeah,
hope none of them see that. And literally half of them had saw that. And I was like, oh, they're going to think I'm just doing that. But it worked out.
yes, a
Um,
100%.
but yeah, do you have another question, Mr. Player?
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. All right. So when you were building this out,
Hmm.
you knew that you had the big baddie of the campaign Vecna.
I
You knew
actually
that that was
didn't.
wrong. You
It,
didn't know who was going to be the big baddie. I know you had a couple of baddies,
so, Curse of Strahd, yeah. So, I'm going to be honest with you. Curse of Strahd, the bit like originally because we were just playing at like a game store. We had all just gotten to know each other a little bit, and we were just playing at a game store. Curse of Strahd, the big bad was going to just be Strahd. Like I wasn't gonna do anything with like his wizard slash sorcerer training or anything along those lines, um, at all. I wasn't gonna touch on that at all. It was just gonna be like, yeah, he's like a wizard sorcerer. He can definitely cast magic, and he has crazy magical capabilities. That was gonna be it. That was gonna be everything. And then we decided let's continue going. And then as for the big bad, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I had no idea who my big bad was gonna be
Well,
for the longest time.
I imagine that you had already set up. You had previously set up. You had Jameson.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, your stuff. Yeah.
you had. Well, I'm just listing up the potential big baddies that
Mm-hmm.
the campaign is going to drive to. You revealed Vecna.
Mm-hmm.
You revealed the Spider Queen's crown and her influence, and that she could be a very very big problem and big baddie.
Yep.
You introduced the Blood Hunters, the three originals return and the corruption of that
Mm-hmm.
and the corruption demon herself. We touched on a little bit of Saren Ray hating undeath that also goes for, and there was like a small mention of like Vecna and Orcus and
Very small for Orcus. I
yeah,
there was
they
part of me was like, I don't really want to touch on Orcus. Like as cool as Orcus is, I was like, we're just not gonna touch with Orcus. But yeah, those ones.
I love Orcus as a
Yeah,
bad guy.
Orcus is a
I wonder
great bad guy, and I
I
plan on
always
using him at some point. But yeah,
yeah, I always wondered like how would that play out because that is such a like Vecna is so like scary,
yeah.
but when I think of Orcus, I think of oh god,
But
like this
yeah,
is
Orcus
yeah. Anyway,
is very much the more chaotic, evil, undead lich sort of situation where like he's like, no, I'm just gonna go to a town and just fully kill everyone because I can. Whereas Vecna's like, no, I'm gonna hide in the shadows and just do a bunch of things while the party's focused over here, and then I'm just gonna go do this thing that I actually needed to do, which I
yeah.
like doing because I was always doing the misdirection with the party, and they're all just like, we don't know what to do, and I'm just like, sorry
Oh
guys.
yeah, and then there's Baba Yaga.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, they pissed off Baba Yaga, like
Yeah,
fully pissed her off so bad.
yeah.
And she became an enemy to the party. There was
So
also, uh,
so
yeah,
here. Oh, you got another bad guy that
yeah.
like particular.
There was one more. It was another one in Val's backstory. It was the shaman, or like sort of like the soothsayer that restored you to life, that was working to resurrect
Oh
Jameson.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which
We
turned
kind of.
out
You ever figure out who that was?
you guys figured it out. I'll remind you when we get to it. But yeah, you guys figured it out, and it was a pretty decent reveal, and it made a lot of sense because of where Jameson was located within the Hells. So it
Uh,
made sense.
yeah, yeah. Well, so like you had all these different threads of
Mhm.
like what could possibly lead to what way could we go? How would we go about what direction, or who's going to be the long term bad guy? What's is inevitably going to be our thing? Did you have multiple threads mapped out of like what's possibly going to be the the big bad evil guy of this campaign? Are we gonna like go after the whole Vecna thing? Are we gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna ignore that and just do the Jameson only thing, or is there gonna be something else that we would uncover, or Baba Yaga and the Feywild and do that a little more?
Yeah.
Did you have multiple like
It
ideas of where to go?
it really depended on what you guys did, to be fair, because like yeah, I layered a bunch of these threads, and like yeah, you guys pissed off Baba Yaga pretty bad, but like you guys were also still in Barovia at the time, so I was like, uh you guys never seem to had any inklings to want to visit the Feywild again after your guys' one-time visit. So Baba Yaga was kind of on the back burner. She was the furthest one away. And then
Okay.
I will say Vecna was number one for the longest time, and he eventually is who I went up with, because I really delved into Strahd's backstory, and I wanted it to seamlessly fit into Curse of Strahd, and there really isn't a lot of mention behind the teacher that taught Strahd his magic, because canonically Strahd is like a wizard. He is a spellcaster of some sort that was taught, because he is noble born, and he was taught how to use his magic from whatever teacher his family hired. And so I was like, what if the teacher was like archlich Vecna, because he saw Strahd had something that he wanted. And that's kind of what led me down, like, what would Vecna have wanted? Why would Vecna have willingly taught someone magic? And I was just like, I kept going over and over, and I was like, okay, what is something sorcerers can do? And I was like, sorcerers are innately magical, and some are connected to other planes of existences. Vecna wants to mash all the planes of existences. What's a good plane for Vecna to want to mash first? Shadowfell. Okay, what sorcerers are connected to Shadowfell? Shadow sorcerers. And I basically just went like, Vecna wanted a group of shadow sorcerers so he could use their innate connection to the shadow plane to essentially pull it in to the material plane and be its first domino, essentially.
Okay, okay. All right. So you did have a choice
Mm-hmm.
pick, but you did have kind of an idea of open threads of which way we were gonna go,
Yeah,
leading to the end goal of Vecna.
yeah. Vecna just felt the best after a while. Like Vecna really did feel like the absolute best
Okay.
choice, and that's why I
All right.
chose him.
That makes sense.
Yep.
All right. So we are in kind of a bind because once we get there, back to the material plane and all this realizations going on.
Well, before you guys get there, I do want to point out, because I do want to touch on this before we just jump into the material plane. The final one, there was another request from a party member in Strahd, if you remember. Another person made a request of Vecna. This was the final request in Barovia that Lenestra did, if you remember. It was when
Oh,
you guys
wait,
were.
wait, yes.
So if we jump back to the throne room with
Well,
with Irina and the
let's
crown.
rewind it. Let's rewind it a little bit further. We were on top of a rooftop structure in the castle part, right? And
Yeah,
we
and it
were
was
taking
breaking apart.
on
Yeah.
yeah, we were taking on Strahd,
Mm-hmm.
and Strahd was wielding. He had like a necrotic hand that would look like it was
Mm-hmm.
not regenerating like the rest of him, and an eye, if I
He did not
remember.
have the eye. He had the
He did not
hand.
have that. He had the hand,
Mm-hmm.
and we murked him. Like like Val transformed into his Lycan form, and like and
Mm-hmm.
then Toad raged like hell, and his dragon skills glistening, and was bringing in the storm, and
Breachy was not there yet.
Ricci wasn't. Oh no, no, no,
It was
Silver.
Linestra.
No,
It
oh
was just
Linestra.
it was just you four.
Yeah, and Linestra was bringing the Twilight power, and we were just pounding him, and we finally cut off one arm, wrestled away Kaz's blade,
And yeah,
and
one of the
we,
arm that you guys cut off and the blade went in two different directions, and you rolled high
yeah,
enough to save one of them. I was like,
we
which
saved
one you
the
going
blade.
for? And you guys
We
went for the
saved the
blade.
blade of Kat, and Linestra held on to that, which it
Yes.
became a problem later,
Yeah.
and then we went into the throne room after getting down, and we ran into Strahd's wife, or bride to be, that is.
Bride to be. She wasn't officially married yet. She was the bride to be. Strahd at this point had captured Arena because the party had not gotten her away from Barovia because of just reasons. They were
Mm.
literally trying to find more information out on how to break out this cold raven at the time, as well as they were also dealing with the fact that uh, Val was dying, actively
Yeah.
dying, and he needed to get his brother, and so that became like the party's number one thing versus doing whatever the fuck they needed to do against Strahd, which was fair. Whatever, that's fine.
And we needed to find the Sunblade.
Yeah, they needed the Sunblade before anything. They wanted to have the blade in hand before they started like messing with Strahd's plans at all. So that's why they didn't find Irina in time. Strahd did, and he basically brought her and had
And turned
placed.
her.
Yeah, she wasn't fully turned, if you remember. She was
I'm talking
still.
about they turned her to his
Yeah,
side. That was
this
a sword.
yeah, this Strahd was very much corrupted by the blade and a certain hand on his body. He was very much corrupted. He was not his normal suave, noble self. He was very much demented and wanted things a certain way, and he wanted this to happen his way. And so,
Yeah.
because of that, he had definitely manipulated her mind with magic and forced her to think that she was his fiance, his bride to be. And she put on the Spider Queen's crown, and basically they were brought to the throne room. They see this woman wearing the crown. They see the rooms covered in spider webs and cocoons, and dripping down from the cocoons are a bunch of different blood Strahds. Like they are made from blood itself, and they were being attacked by bloodied Strahds. And
Yeah. They
Lenestra,
were essentially like blood construct,
yes,
a
made of
water
pure blood.
elemental, but they were made of pure blood and in the likeness of Strahd. And on top of her head sit the Spider Queen's crown, which granted
Yes.
her great power.
Oh yeah, over spiders. So she had on top of Strahd doing that, she had a couple of like pretty powerful spiders there helping her as well. And she was watching this play out, and Lenestra, in a very like flash of genius sort of way, on her turn basically said, "Vecna, I call to thee." And Vecna said, "Yes, my child." And basically said, "My request, I want to swap the
Crown. Yeah.
for I want basically Linestra is wearing the token of Ravenkind. It's another magic item within Curse of Strahd that does a bunch of magical effects. It's a legendary item, and it's a token of Ravenkind that canonically it's supposed to represent like the Zaroviches and like stuff like that, but we let it rule as its connection to the Raven Queen.
Yeah.
And they had just found all the pieces of it because it was split in half, and they found all the pieces for it. And Linestra was wearing it like a crown on her horns. And Linestra said, Vecna, I want you to swap my crown with hers. And Vecna said, "Oh, darling, is that all?" And she
Yeah.
said, "Yes." And uh, yeah, Irina basically had to make a saving throw with disadvantage because Vecna was taking that off of her. She failed, and she swapped them, and immediately the crown fell uh, uh, onto her
Lynette.
head, Linestra's head. So not only was Linestra wielding a sword of pure darkness, but also had a crown of essentially pure darkness as well. So definitely
And
living up to the name of the light will hold back the darkness. And so that happened. They swapped. Immediately, Irina falls to the ground in like a coma as the crown is forcefully ripped off of her by another godlike being and replaced with this other one that immediately burns away all of the influences of the Spider Queen. So she drops to the ground unconscious. All the constructs begin to fluctuate and begin to just dissipate almost immediately. And then the world of Barovia begins to rip apart as the void storm comes around it and begins to shake the entire plane like a massive earthquake. The party huddles together in the castle, and I think this is where we're going to end for episode 4.
absolutely, absolutely. And I cannot wait to get into the next part 'cause this is where
Verici,
realizations are made. Verici is met. Val goes away for a little bit
just a
in
little bit.
search of something, and we introduce another character that I played for
A session.
reasons. Yeah, a session, but he became a part of an intricate part of the lore that would happen later. But that's for episode 4. But in the meantime, please, guys, like, subscribe, comment
Comment and
down
follow.
below. Oh yeah, comment and follow, and follow us on Twitch and Instagram and Facebook. Give us feedback, leave comments, any questions that you guys may have, and we can answer. I'm going to be getting better at posting well in advance the live events and talks for Tavern Talk, and when they'll be live, and then they'll be available on VOD on Patreon, for those that are lovely Patreons and that are helping out the channel. And please check out our Patreon. Donate if you're feeling generous. Even $1 will go a long way and help us out. We're gonna add more stuff onto Patreon, merch, wink, wink. Hopefully, um, and we're going to have some pretty interesting and cool things on there. We're also going to continue this discussion into the Unnatural story and
Mm-hmm.
why the name and the emblem is so important to the best one, and myself.
Yeah.
And we can't stress enough how thankful we are with the community that's growing right now, that's showing their support, because we never thought that we would get this many or this far. Uh,
Absolutely not. We thought we
yeah,
would crash and burn.
well, not so much crash and burn, but we thought like the best we can hope for is 200 subscribers. That's probably good enough. Not 3,000 subscribers. We didn't think that that was ever a possibility in the realm of possibilities for us, but we are so thankful that we're even getting this far. But please, everyone, if you believe in that this is going to be something like we do, and you want to help out,
Mm-hmm.
you know what to do. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave comments down below,
Mm-hmm.
interact with the live chat. If you have any questions to ask us about anything, we will answer them. I swear, we check out the comments. And if you want to, if you have any requests of videos, ideas, or games, anything like that, we are so open to interacting with
Mm-hmm.
the community. So
Yeah.
please don't hesitate.
Yeah, and like the worst one said, we're going to be continuing our story with the Unnaturals. This was the first campaign that me and the worst one ever played together. But after we talk about the entire Unnatural story, the Tavern Talks may take a shift, and we will probably start talking about just like topics like games we like and stuff like that. We still like D&D. Like D&D is still our bread and butter. So obviously we will still talk about that. We may talk about our second campaign that is still actively ongoing. But we won't mention that until we get closer to the end of this one because we still got a while on this one. Like
Yes.
plenty of stuff happened
Oh,
after Barovia that kept this group engaged. Let's just say plane jumping happened at least 7 or 8 more times
Yeah. And on top
minimum.
of that, we are looking and we might have, guests on our Tavern Talk. Some might be from the campaign of the Unnaturals fellow players. Some might be outside people that just have questions. But, but that's for future. And we will keep everyone posted going
Hmm.
forward on what's to come.
Yeah.
But
But
in the meantime,
like the worst one always says,
have an unnatural evening, guys.